The president of the March for Life, Jeanne Mancini, joins us now, as well as a prominent voice in the pro-life movement, Erika, Bachiochi, a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. Jeanne, a week has gone by since the 2022 March. I hope that you've recovered. You had a permit for 50,000 people on the National Mall. How many do you think actually showed up?
I'd say more than 50. So we have a permit for the National Mall and then what's called the parade route, where people actually march, and many more come to that second part. And I'd say that was probably closer to 70 to maybe 100,000. So these are informal estimates.
But it was amazing to see so many people. It was so cold, come out and just fill the streets. And I know that it was because they know that there will be a decision in the Mississippi abortion law case before the end of the summer. And with that in mind, would you move the march to that new date to celebrate that moment?
Well, please God, there is a very good decision in June related to the Dobbs case, and we're thinking about that and analyzing it, and we'll make an announcement at that time.
It would make it a little warmer for sure. Erika, you've spoken about pro-life feminism. You have a new book about this, The Rights of Women. And was this year a little more representative of your vision for a pro-life movement that defends life in the womb for sure, but also seeks to embrace all kinds of women?
Yeah, no, I think you're seeing way more representation of pro-life feminists. We saw them out at the steps of the Supreme Court during oral arguments and Dobbs, really pushing back at this kind of central idea in Planned Parenthood versus Casey that abortion is necessary for women's equality. It's really kind of a nonsensical argument. And so I think pro-life feminists have done a really great job this year of pushing back, of claiming our equality on other grounds, which has been excellent.
And one of the discussions that you've had is around policies. One of the many discoveries in last month's Build Back Better discussions was the exclusion of religious child care providers in the draft that passed the House. One of the many discoveries in last month's Build Back Better discussions was the exclusion of religious child care providers in the draft that passed the House. A survey by the Bipartisan Policy Center revealed that some 31% of households with a single parent or working parents use center-based care. Of those families, more than half the families that use child care centers use centers that are affiliated with a faith organization. How is this indicative of the hill we must climb, the kind of discussions we need to have to see policies reflective of the needs of women and family life?
Yeah, I think, it's obviously important that we continue to do all the work we've been doing for the last 50 years at the grassroots, caring for women in crisis, adopting children, doing all of that good work the pro-life movement has been engaged in. But we certainly need to be seeing both the left and the right come together on a really robust family policy. I mean, I've been talking about it as a kind of a corrective to the libertarian tendency of both the left and the right. But we've got to do this in a way that really meets the needs of the families as they are. So as you say, I mean, these families want to be able to choose where they want to send their kids if they need childcare, or to be able to care for their children in their own home. Sometimes the Democrats tend to want to take an entirely statist approach, which kind of takes over care for children as sort of a state-based thing. And families really want to be able to do the care themselves, or ask grandparents, or the child care provider of their choosing to do that. And I think we really need to be listening to them and doing a better job of doing just that.
Yeah, policies that reflect the ability of the individual to choose people that share their values to work with in order to have this pro-family way of life. Jeanne, at the march, you mentioned a shift in the focus of the pro-life movement. Let's take a listen to that.
No matter how Dobbs is decided, your voice and the importance of that on the federal and state levels are all the more important. If Roe falls, the battle lines will change. But make no mistake, the fight for life will need to continue in the states and here in D.C.
What have you achieved so far in this shift to move things back to the states, and why is that your focus?
Well, Montse, about 6 years ago at the March for Life, we began a state march initiative, realizing that rallying the grassroots is so powerful at the level of the states. And we got a little bit paused in COVID, but we've still been growing pretty rapidly. So even just in the past few months leading up to this march, we were able to have the 3rd annual Virginia State March, a march in Pennsylvania, the first march in Harrisburg, and then a march in Sacramento, California. And we plan to be in many more states this year. So We've seen the power of rallying the grassroots. With each of those states I just mentioned, there was a specific victory. For example, in California, we asked marchers to text in about a bad bill related to abortion coverage in the health insurance, and the next day it was pulled off of the House floor. So we're seeing results when we rally the grassroots at the state level, and we plan to be even more actively involved in that capacity. But we can't let off at the federal level either, even if Roe is overturned, and please God that happens.
And have other states picked up the mantle since California, you mentioned, New York and New Jersey have passed aggressive abortion laws or declared themselves abortion havens? Is this a policy issue or one where outreach and funding for pregnancy centers is also necessary?
Both, right? So we know that culture is upstream of politics and policy, and that especially when you're looking at Catholic social teaching, it's all important. So we can't focus just on providing services, but that is absolutely critical. And we can't focus on just changing laws. We have to change hearts and minds, right? So it's all important. So it's sort of like St. Therese, I want it all. We need to work for it all to build a culture of life.
Absolutely. Erika, let's dream a little then. What does the post-Roe world look like for women in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, I think we've got a lot of work to do. We've really been, the language of Planned Parenthood versus Casey tells it all, that we've been relying upon abortion for women's participation. And it's just, first of all, it's silly to think that many women have been doing that. But then also it's really given, people a crutch, corporations a crutch to say, look, you can just have an abortion. It's the cheaper thing, rather than really transforming our culture so that it really authentically supports women, children, and their families, both at the cultural level, but also in our workplaces and our corporations, in the public sector. And I think it's really important to see that, women are beings who can get pregnant and often do in unplanned ways. And taking care of children is kind of a messy, process that requires a lot of time, and that fathers need to be brought into that. I think that that's a message that I would want to say more and more, is that it's really good for men to be called into parenting with their the mother of their children as well. So those are the kinds of things I would want to see. Of course, family leave, more flexible workplaces. We've seen the capacity for workplaces to be able to be flexible during COVID. Why not for families too? Families do, make possible all of the things that make sort of our economic engine run. So we should be really focusing on what the family needs in the post-Roe future.
Absolutely. Jeanne, the last question for you. What is the role of the church in making that dream happen?
It's everything. So to me, this is a spiritual battle, and I think we need to pray and fast, and I feel that more than ever before. So I think the single most important role is the role of the church and us responding to the church in this.
Well, we'll take that to heart, and we'll be watching carefully for that decision in June and all the plans that you have at the state level. Thank you both, Jeanne and Erika.
Thanks for having us.